Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Wealthy Brains. Today we're going to be talking about Ray Dalio and his concerns about the current economy. You are going to be shocked, so watch till the end. Veteran hedge fund manager says capitalists don't divide the economic pie well, so the system isn't working effectively for all. Ray Dalio certainly is no radical idealist, but in his frequent writings and media appearances, the veteran investor consistently calls for Americans to rewrite their long-standing contract with capitalism so that it is fairer and more generous to more people. Otherwise, he predicts life in the US could become more difficult. Mountainous debt that stunts economic growth, fewer opportunities for ordinary citizens to get ahead financially, and a worldwide lack of trust in the US dollar that diminishes Americans' purchasing power and could lower their standard of living. Dalio is the founder of Bridgewater Associates, the world's largest hedge fund firm, which has made him a billionaire. So it's not surprising that he champions capitalism as a proven way to expand economic growth and living standards. Capitalism and capitalists are good at increasing and producing productivity to increase the size of the economic pie, he says. Then Dalio stands the tenet on its own head. Capitalists don't divide the economic pie very well, he says. So today, the capitalist system, the foundation of the US economy, is not working efficiently and effectively enough for all. Capitalism also produces large wealth gaps that produce opportunity gaps, which threaten the system, Dalio says. A system that has been and still is the key to the health and success of US business, workers, government, and investors alike. Unless the US takes steps to make systemic repairs designed to provide greater opportunity for more Americans to achieve personal growth and financial security, the consequences likely will be painful for the country. As Dalio explains in his recent telephone interview, which has been edited for length and clarity. Market Watch. You have written and spoken about three big domestic and international problems facing the US over the next 5 to 10 years and how a failure to address these challenges could threaten America's standing in the world. What are these three pressing problems? Ray Dalio. I look at it mechanically, like a doctor looking at a disease. If asked what the issue here is, I would say that it is a certain type of disease that has certain patterns which are timeless and universal, and the United States is broadly following that progression. There are three problems that are coming together, so it's important to understand them individually and how they collectively make a bigger problem. There is a money and credit cycle problem, a wealth and values gap problem, and an emerging great power challenging the existing dominant power problem. It's a fact that there has been a weakening of the competitive advantages of the United States over the last couple of decades. For example, the United States lost a lot of education advantage relative to other countries. Our share of the world GDP is reduced. The wealth gap has increased, which has contributed to our political and social polarization. But we haven't lost all of our competitive advantages. For example, in innovation and technology, the United States is still the strongest, but China is coming on very strong and at existing rates will surpass the United States. Militarily, the US is stronger, but China also has come on very strong and is probably stronger in the waters close to China that include Taiwan and other disputed areas. Finances for both countries are challenging, but for the US, more so. The US is in the late stages of debt cycle and money cycle in which we're producing a lot of debt and printing a lot of money. That's a problem. As a reserve currency status, the US dollar DXY 0.55% is still dominant, though it's being threatened by its central bank printing of money and increasing the debt production problem. The United States is a 75-year-old empire and it is exhibiting signs of decline. Market Watch, focusing on the money and credit problem, excessive debt can be a killer for business and families. But most people don't realize that debt plays havoc with their country's finances as well. Dalio. If you look at the history, for example, the Dutch Empire, the British Empire both experienced the creation of debt and printing of money, less educational advantages, greater internal wealth conflict, greater challenges from rival countries. Every country has stress tests. If you look at British history, the development of rival countries led them to lose their competitive advantages. Their finances were bad because they had accumulated a lot of debt. So, after World War II, those trends went against them. Then they had the Suez Canal incident, and they were no longer a world power, and a British pound is no longer a reserve currency. The United States' relative position in the world, which was dominant in almost all these categories at the beginning of the world order in 1945, has declined and is exhibiting real signs that should raise worries. There's a lot of baggage. The US has a lot of debt, which is adding to the hurdles that typically drag an economy down. So, in order to succeed, You have to do a pretty big debt restructuring. I just want to present understanding and facts. There's a life cycle. You're born and you die. And as you get older, you see certain things that are symptoms of later being on in life. To know the life cycle and to know that these symptoms are emerging is what I'm trying to convey. The United States is a 75-year-old empire and it is exhibiting signs of decline. If you want to extend your life, there are clear things you can do, but it means doing things that you don't want to do. Wealth cannot be created by creating debt and money. Market watch. About the dollar being threatened as the world's reserve currency. What does close mean? And what would the decline of the status mean for Americans? Dalio, within the next 5 years, you could see a situation in which foreigners who have been lending money to the United States won't want to, and the dollar would not be as readily accepted for making purchases in the world as it is now. We have to realize that we're spending more than we're earning. Every individual, every company, and every country has an income statement and a balance sheet. The income statement is how much is your earnings are relative to your expenses. If your earnings are greater than your expenses, great. You will increase your balance sheet. If your earnings are less than your expenses, then you have to draw on your balance sheet. The United States doesn't have a good income statement and a balance sheet in dealing with the rest of the world. It is running a deficit to the rest of the world that is financed by borrowing money so that we are producing liabilities. Our living standards are based on our spending, not on our income statement or balance sheet. If the US loses that ability and it doesn't force itself to be more productive, one day it will lose the ability to borrow and then we will have to cut spending, which is painful. When that pain happens at a time when you have the population at each other's throats over money, that's toxic combination. People can't have a downturn and have less buying power. So necessarily the poor will have to be getting more money from the rich, and the rich are going to want to prevent that. And then if it's bad enough, then it messes up productivity. Market watch. What steps do politicians and business leaders need to take now to create and implement reforms that will fortify the US balance sheet and the dollar status?